that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city, our salvation will be placed for walls and bulwarks. Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which maintains their
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We are continuing in the book of Hebrews in chapter 12. We looked at the first couple verses, but we'll read them quickly here to give us some context. He just gone about talking about all these witnesses of faith. Now, I don't know if it means, when I say, when it talks about great cloud of witnesses, it's not so much the people that witness, but that the faith that they exhibit witnessed. It was the things they did through faith that were the witnesses. It's the evidence of things unseen. Because otherwise they can just, it has to be something done. Abraham believed God and was imputed to him for righteousness. But we knew he believed him because he did what God said to do, which was get up and go. And on some level, we have to obey God. On some level, on an absolute level. But, let's just continue on because it's going to go into this subject. He's saying, let us lay aside every weight, and the sin that so easily besets us round about. Life is filled with sin all around. There's always temptation to sin. There's always weights. There's always burdens to bear. There's always things that will interfere or disrupt your peace, your tranquility, and your walk with God, or attempt to do so. But we should look to the examples of the past and to the examples in our own life to try to lay aside the weights. This is not axiomatic as far as laying aside weight. There are other scriptures about taking out, every man must bear his own burden. But there's different aspects of the idea of burden carrying. A burden you carry may be something important you need to carry for the sake of others or yourself or whatever, for the sake of your calling. There are other kinds of weights that merely just weigh us down, that are merely just things dragging us down and slowing us down, that are not any kind of legitimate thing from God that God has sent for us to carry and to bear. But it is rather something that we ought to separate ourselves from. That's what's meant by weight here. Every weight and the sin that so easily besets us. Every weight that prevents us from running this race with patience. Because the race itself, you could look at it as a burden. I've got to run this race. You don't lay that aside. So there are things we must do and carry. But there are weights which are not for that. What would be the example? I don't know if they be the example, but it's you have to look in your own situation and say what there are some things we carry. Figuratively, in the sense of emotional or intellectual, psychological issues that we need to let go of. There may be anger, wrath, malice, bitterness, jealousy. And the weight of it. Because they all have their price and their weight and their cost for carrying. Everything you carry with you costs something, It costs or it gives something, And you want to carry the things that give something. But the things that cost, depending on what the cost is, obviously. If it's a cost of, if it's deleterious to your walk with God, it's likely not something you should continue to carry. Something you have to judge based on your own conscience and examining your own situation. What is it that holds me back? What is it that keeps me from running the race with patience? Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. Okay. I was expecting more language there. Right hand of the throne of God. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He endured the cross, the author and finisher of our faith. Notice he's the author and the finisher, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. There is a necessity. If faith, the beginning of your faith, and there's an end of your faith. There was a passage where it says, receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your soul. The end result of faith is salvation. We think of it generally as the initial result of faith is salvation. I mean, the instant we have faith, we have salvation. And that is only true in the sense that it is true that all things are put under Christ's feet right now. Because they are. Technically speaking, they are under his feet. They have to be. Why? Because God spoke it. Because God said it would be. And therefore it shall be. And in essence, it is. Because what will be is what is. Which was and is to come. There is a to come yet. But that is what shall yet be at that time. It'll become the is. And, well, that may be a little convoluted now that I think about what I just said. Even so. We put our faith in him, and we have a promise of God of salvation. But we don't actually receive the de facto salvation, which is the resurrection, until all the life has gone by, we've died, and then we're raised. We must die once before we go to judgment. And so for the joy that was set before him, meaning the joy of the resurrection and of the kingdom and of the victory, he endured the cross. Despised the shame. It may be shame. It may be something that is shameful in the sense of people look at it and it is not an honorable death. They reserved it for the worst criminals, or certainly those whom they wanted people to know they had contempt for, the Romans. So the cross was an exceedingly humiliating and shameful way to die. I mean, because you're out pretty much naked in front of everybody, hanging out in the sun. And also the mocking, and everyone just knows. I mean, it's a public execution. It's not particularly, there's a lot of things I've done in public, but die is not one of the ones I ever really thought I'd want to do. Especially because this kind of death represents a humiliating kind of defeat. That's how it would look to the people who watched it, and even to this day, to unbelievers, the death of Christ is a humiliating defeat, and the resurrection just a pathetic way to deal with the crushing loss. But I believe Jesus is alive because when I called on his name, he came to me, and he gave me his power. So whatever with you people who don't know the Lord, but I know him. And so and now sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. That's a fact we talk about many times, that is the position of Christ, and that he is there waiting to receive his kingdom. There is an anticipation, still waiting. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. Ye have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. There's a verse that I think I refer to somewhat frequently, or this section anyways. And because the chastening of the Lord, the section here about chastisement is important because it helps us understand, put in context the things we suffer sometimes, because not everything we suffer is some sort of punishment for sin. Either a natural consequence or a direct consequence, meaning some sort of judgment from God. Meaning natural consequences, some sins are a punishment unto themselves. You do wrong, and there are consequences that either may or are likely to or definitely come, depending on, because not everything. Consequences don't always happen immediately, and they don't not always come visibly in our life. So I know kids who got away with stealing, and they didn't. There were consequences though, but not direct, immediate ones. Getting away with stealing is a consequence unto itself, because if you get away with it, it emboldens you. Anything you do once that you shouldn't do, it emboldens you. I remember when first trying smoking, trying drinking, trying drugs, all that stuff. The first time was the hardest time. Once you got past the taboo there, after that it's pretty much, hey, welcome to the land of sin. It's hard once you overcome a taboo. It's hard to go back. It says, so consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners. I wanted to actually, there are several words I'm going to want to check out as we are studying this passage. So let's get this here from Bible Hub. This is a resource I use all the time, as you know. Simplicity itself. Lay aside every weight and the sin. What's weight mean? A bulk and encumbrance, sure. Author and finisher. I don't know why I'm looking at those words. Whenever I hover, a little pop-up window shows, and I'm like just peeking at these and looking. Where was the one I wanted? Consider him I wanted contradiction. Okay, I was just curious what it was. It literally means contradiction. Antilogia. We have logos and anti. Anti-word, basically. He endured such contradictions of sinners against himself. They accused him of all kinds of things. Of subversion. Of making himself God. And of all these things, thou being a man, makest thyself God. That was one of the accusations. And how do I want to characterize the well, the point is, it's like they said, no, you're not the Son of God. The world would say, he comes in, I'm the Son of God. He didn't exactly say it like that, but that's the presentation. Here is the Son of God. This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. God himself said it out of the heavens in the presence of John the Baptist and others, and he was going around performing miracles. Yet at the same time, he comes into their hands and they treat him like a criminal. They treat him like a evildoer, for like a sinner for speaking the truth. This contradiction, because that is a contradiction. That he should be condemned who had done nothing. So, that is quite a rough pill to swallow. You know what I mean? To be completely innocent. Because look, something bad could happen to me. Right? Something just bad, random, out of nowhere, right? And while I could say, well, I haven't done anything that's immediately obvious as a reason why this bad thing would happen to me. Like, I don't know why I just kicked a dog and then something bad happened. I don't know why I kicked a baby. I'm trying to think of something. Whatever. I did something bad, and then something came about that seemed to be an obvious consequence. Well, maybe that's the case, or maybe it's just a coincidence. Or maybe God's trying to get our attention. It could be any of those things. Right? But sometimes, but what I'm saying is, but sometimes something happens and there's no obvious reason it happens, right? But if I'm looking for a reason, I could look and I could say, well, you know what? I can't find a direct reason right now, but I know that I probably deserve it. I've done enough things wrong to deserve this. Like let's say, I got in trouble and I was in a store and I got arrested falsely for stealing or something, right? And whatever, and there's footage in the camera. Some guy looks like me or something. I don't know, right? It's wrong though. It's false. I didn't do anything. I could be falsely accused. But I can look at my life and say, like, yeah, but you know what? Like the thief on the cross, I've done wrong. I may not deserve, well, on the cross they said, well, we deserve this. So he confessed that they deserve what they got. But this man has done nothing. Well, maybe I don't deserve this specifically. Maybe the punishment doesn't fit this crime. Maybe there is no crime. I'm just being punished for nothing. But I can look back in my life and find reasons I should be punished. I can look back and I can see a cosmic justice. Overall cosmos, the world. If you look at the world from a certain perspective of my entire life, maybe I don't deserve a good end. Maybe I just don't deserve it. So I could look at my life like that. You couldn't look at Jesus' life like that. He really resisted, and he was enduring a contradiction like we could never imagine, because he had no guilty conscience. There was no sin he had committed which would justify what they were doing to him. And he endured it. And he's saying, I want you to think about that, lest you be weary in your minds. Because the things you suffer, the weights you carry, he was talking about bearing weights. You have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. You haven't laid down your life in the battle against sin, have you? Because we think, oh, it's so, I'm growing weary of all these things, and life is difficult, and there's so many challenges, and why do bad things happen to me? And I just don't know if God's on my side, and I'm weary and fainting in my heart, where I'm like, I can't, because remember he's talking about running a race. I'm running the race for Christ, but now, I'm getting weary and faint. I don't know. I thought things would go better for me being a Christian. I thought I would have a smooth path ahead of me. No obstacles in my way. I thought it would be all easy street from here on in. And he's like, no, consider the Lord. Consider what he endured. You haven't endured anything like that. Have you bled? You know what I mean? I've wept because of sin. I've gotten on my knees because of sin. I never bled because of sin. And certainly not because I was resisting it. You know what I mean? What have I suffered? How badly have I suffered resisting sin? You know what I mean? How much have I suffered? I can tell that I have suffered somewhat. It seems kind of pathetic as it comes to mind, I quit smoking, and that was hard. I kind of had to lay on a couch for 3 days because I was so agitated by the withdrawal from the nicotine. 3 days of basically me just laying around and being useless. And I had to do that. I did that on several occasions where the quitting didn't stick before it finally stuck for good. I mean, it's been, I quit smoking in 2005. So that's 15 years. And glad I did. And I don't condemn anybody who uses nicotine, really, but I just wanted to quit. And I'm just saying it was hard. If you want to stop something and you can't, then it kind of is sin, at least in your own conscience. You know what I mean? But you don't have to have a conscience about that. I don't think nicotine is not a serious. I just don't like anything running my life, which I felt like it was doing. And I couldn't readily drop. Also, the withdrawal from alcohol. We've gone through that. And that can be a bit much, right? This would be uncomfortable feelings. It's hard to just stop when you get on any kind of addictive path, right? That's about the extent of what I would say the suffering I've endured striving against sin is I've endured withdrawal from substances. I've endured that. And that feels like something that is striving against sin. You know what I mean? But there are other ways you might strive against sin. Like John the Baptist, he was talking about how Herod wasn't allowed to marry his brother's wife, and that it was adultery, and he got killed. That's striving against sin to blood, resisting it to the level of where you're bleeding. I mean, maybe in here it has more of a perspective of directed towards the self, meaning not John resisting, maybe John the Baptist resisting Herod's sin may not be exactly what he has in mind. Obviously, it's not what's in mind, but I'm looking for examples that you may be familiar with of people where sin is involved and their battle against it in some way results in bodily harm to themselves. Very much so. Jesus, what is this, the temptation to basically lie about himself and get himself off and make himself free. He had opportunities to free himself. That would have been sin because it would have been disobedience to God. So in a sense of resisting the urge to save yourself in that case could even be construed as striving against sin. But the point is, the battle against sin, most of us have not bled over it, are not likely to bleed over it, And he's saying, hey, don't get tired about the battle and about the race you're running. The striving against sin, that is the race we run. It's like we are saved, but we also run, and we run not ineffectually. We run to win. And the battle is life and death, sin and obedience. We want to be righteous and obedient before God. And it's not like some sort of prerequisite. It's just what we're doing while we're being Christians. It's okay. While you're being a Christian, this is what you do. And you have not forgotten that, you have forgotten. You've forgotten something. The exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. There's a certain exhortation that you've forgotten. And it's talking to you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. I'm going to read a little more here. For if ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then ye are bastards and not sons. Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? For they verily for a few days chasten us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. It keeps going on. on. All right. I don't want to. I probably will have to. I hope we can cover all that today, and I think we will. But I just didn't want to read too far ahead before we kind of just start talking about some of this stuff. Because he does dwell on the subject a bit here. We dwell on it just a bit. So the exhortation is, hey, don't hate, don't despise, don't bristle at the chastening of God. There is a certain amount of, of the suffering of life, the weight. There are weights to be laid aside. You know what I mean? But we are running a race, and that in itself is a burden to carry. You got to carry yourself over the finish line. I mean, there is a burden you must bear, right? Looking to Jesus, author and finisher of our faith. Enduring the chastening of the Lord, not despising it, and understanding that the things sometimes we do, not everything you suffer is a chastisement either. There can be chastisements. Certainly anything that doesn't kill you or destroy your faith. I mean, because you can have something happen in your life that's so devastating that it actually undermines your belief in God. I mean, I've seen it happen to people where they lose a loved one or something, and it just, their faith had been all bound up in the life they were living, is in terms of being like God's plan, and then when something happened that they couldn't fit into the view they had been holding of this blessing, and it severely disrupted their faith in God, and because they weren't prepared to endure something like that even looked like chastisement. Because that's the thing, it's like, I don't necessarily know whether something good is a chastisement or not, or something that happens to me that's not good is a chastisement or not. One, not good, saying not good is kind of, I'm jumping ahead of things, because as it'll say, no chastisement for the time present seems good. Never seems good. So it's hard to tell right away if it is good. One thing, is it a chastisement? Well, if it's a chastisement, I think it's useful, it makes sense if you can tell. Meaning sometimes we suffer things and we know why we suffer them. And that's a pretty good key to know that, like, hey, this could be a chastisement from God, because I know why I'm suffering this. It's because of my sin. Like, if you can draw a direct line, it's not always easy to draw a direct line. Like if someone steals and then they get caught and then they got to go to court, and obviously this is a predictable outcome. You know what I mean? Someone could, you'll lie and then you get caught and then you inherit mistrust. Now that is a very bad price to pay, because mistrust is so hard to, trust is a hard thing to rebuild once you've created mistrust. Because, when you meet someone, you may not particularly trust them, but you're not going to totally mistrust them either. There's going to be somewhere in between. There's going to be some sort of middle ground where you meet, when you first meet someone, where you're negotiating and you try to figure out what kind of person they are. Are they a reliable person to negotiate with? And you may find you trust them or not. Trust them enough to take the relationship beyond that baseline level. Now, so why did I bring up trust in that context? Well, you have to tell me how something's chastisement or not. Well, my point is that if you lie, you reap consequences. And so any kind of chastisement, to me, for it to be chastisement, for it to be effectual, the person being chastised has to kind of know they're being chastised. Like when I spank my children, I say that, but it's funny because I rarely ever do. I don't remember the last time I spanked a kid. Like in the past year, I haven't spanked anybody. I'm probably for more than a year. You know what I mean? Spanking is a very rare thing around my house because we have good discipline. Good discipline will prevent you from having to to chasten through spanking. There's all kinds of chastening. Most of the chastening I do is verbal. You know, if someone says something, if there's something going on I don't like, I immediately tell them I don't like it, and then they correct their behavior. And we don't have to get into things like spanking and stuff. Because, I mean, let me tell you this. There's no point in chastening someone. Like, my kids have done things that made me angry that I didn't punish them for. Because I could look back and say, like, well, I never made a rule against that. I'm not going to assume they should have known. Anyone who comes up with a new way to offend me doesn't get punished for it the first time. What you do is you hear about it first. And the good discipline of my house is what means that when they hear me say something, they carry it out. So if I say, I don't want that to happen, it generally never happens. Or if I say, you can't behave this way, they usually stop behaving that way. It helps that I work from home and they're schooled at home. That makes all the difference in the world, because you can't get away from, you have to deal with that. But it also enables me, because they have to deal with me, enables me to actually have a very light hand. Because I'm not a heavy-handed father, I tell you that. I mean, some might say I'm rather imperious, meaning I have a sort of commanding and controlling. I like to control the home. I mean, I can't control everything. I am married to a redhead, so they can be a bit difficult to control at times, I have to confess. So, I mean, what I'm saying is everyone, I don't need to control everybody, but there is some level of baseline home control that we all have to agree and abide to, which we, of course, do. I'm sort of kidding about the redhead thing. I am kidding about it, actually, 100%, I swear. And so, chastisement needs to be something we recognize. If we don't recognize the fact that we're being chastised, like I said, if I don't tell my kids, this is why this is happening, what's the point of punishing them? If you're just suffering and you have no idea why you're suffering, it's probably not a chastisement. If you're hunting for reasons, because there are some things that are just part of life. It's just part of the race that you run. The part of the race you run, there's a big boulder in the middle of the racetrack and you got to climb over it. And that's not particularly standard, but that is how the race you are running is shaping up. And that's just the way it is. I mean, sometimes just how it is. Sometimes bad, they say, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, all things work together for good for those that love God, for those that are called according to his purpose. I mean, we are called of God, so all things are working together for our good, though it's not obvious always at the time what good that is. It's not always obvious that we're being chastened of the Lord. If we are being chastened, if something bad does happen, I do want to look around and a bit. I don't want to get too I don't want to get too caught up in it, though, about hunting. Why is this happening to me? I mean, because Jesus went out in the ship, in the sea, and the sea and the waves began to throw things around, and the ship was tossed, and it was, they were in a storm. They were in a storm. The ship was getting tossed around. Everyone was terrified. Why did bad things keep happening to Jesus? Is he a sinner or something? I mean, you could look at it in the context of bad things happening. He was out in the middle of the desert and he didn't have enough food for everybody. There are bad things happening, right? In some sense, it's something you could measure as a negative, some sort of negative outcome, but not chastisement. Sometimes bad things happen and you suffer them, and it's for one thing only, but for the glory of God, to make you who you are. You know what I mean? Like Jesus said, do you think they were greater sinners because they suffered such things? Sometimes we suffer things that has nothing to do with us being sinners. It has nothing to do with chastisement. It just is part of God's glorious creation. It's like, if we don't, if you're going to tell like an epic story, right? Like the Lord of the Rings or something, they have to cross the mountains. They have to go through the wilderness. They have to face up to the challenges. You know what I mean? And it's what makes the adventure into the adventure, and it's what makes the heroes into heroes. And when you are one of God's elect, you are essentially in a hero class. You have to endure things. You will endure contradiction of sinners if you are so blessed. You know what I mean? So on a certain level, there is, this chastisement. He's not differentiating like I am about chastisement. Because I think he wants you to he's not saying that that's what this is, but he's saying look at it, everything that happens to you as if it was chastisement. But from a certain level, not in the sense of like you're being punished, but rather you're being looked after. You know what I mean? Because that's what he's saying. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons, whom the Lord chasteneth, and he scourges everyone who he receives. Who is a son? Who for what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? It's a good question, because we have sons like that. And what kind of son is that? Who receives no correction from his father. Chasten. Well, let's look at the word real quick. Our English word is probably it's probably too much of a word. Sometimes I feel, what I mean by that is that it's too specific. Chasten, because our word means to make chaste and to obviously put someone on the right path. Chasten. Though it's a little, like I said, it's a little precise. Paiduo is the Greek word. Paid, it means like a child. So the word means to train up children. It means to, literally the word for chastisement is like to raise a child. It has the word child in it. It's like to child rear. That would be like the closest to rear a child. Child rearing. That's almost like this word chastening is like, that would be the literal definition of the word. It literally means to train children. And of course, to them that meant things like corporal punishment and whatever. And to this day, of course, it can mean that. And, some people argue about, I definitely, for my money, and I've talked about punishment and stuff. You should punish as infrequently as you can, and because the degree to which, like in schools, if there are a lot of discipline problems in a school, like they got all these discipline problems with the kids, and they're, there's some level at which you start looking at like, okay, where's this coming from? Where are these discipline problems? And of course, it always goes back to the home. You know what I mean? The schools may be not good at discipline. They probably aren't. Because they're not really supposed to. They're not. I mean, I endured school discipline, and it was often unfair and arbitrary and not very. It didn't compel me to change, it just hardened me. It made me dislike school, the punishment for, tardiness and whatever. All right. But they had this idea of child rearing, and that is what's translated chastening. Child training. Remember, and I like that as the term, as opposed to chastening, because it does evoke in your mind more than just the maximum type thing. Because he did mention the cross of Christ in this context, and we're going to call that chastisement. That's why I said he doesn't have a mind. I will tell you that sometimes bad things happen, and it's just the road you got to go. But in terms of punishment, that may not be a punishment. But in terms of like something that's put in your way to raise you up and to make you into something else, well, in that sense, if you want to call that chastisement, if you want to call it child rearing, if we want to say child rearing and not punishment, then yeah, yes, everything that comes along in your life, every single thing that challenges you, that pushes you, that pulls you, that whatever, tugs you in one direction or the other, that fights with you, that comes against you, that is for you, it's all part of your child rearing. You know, God is bringing many sons to glory. In bringing many sons to glory, he has made the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. It pleased him. We read that, right? It pleased him to make the captain of our salvation perfect through sufferings. He suffered many things. He is the captain. He's the leader, the forerunner. So, what do you think is going to happen? The servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have hated me, they will also hate you. If they had kept my saying, they would have kept yours also. But all these things will they do unto you for my name's sake, because they know not the Father. They know not him that sent me. So, yes, on that level, you can regard all these things as chastisements, but then you have to understand it's not saying just every bad thing that happens to you is a punishment for sin, but rather everything that happens to you, good or bad, is God raising you up as a son. Don't think of chastisement as punishment. Think it is merely that which is corrective, or not necessarily corrective, or that merely builds. Builds on a foundation. Because some things, I correct my children, but I also instruct my children. You know what I mean? I discipline them to do what I expect them to do. And discipline to me does not mean I hit them. It means I have firm control. I obtain that control through a number of things. I only say this because I know people are always interested in family stuff, but it's to being consistent, not overreaching, not having too many rules, and like don't touch the towels or something weird like that. Don't jump on the couch. Some people have rules like that. Don't jump on the couch. I don't have a rule. Don't jump on the couch. But if I tell you not to jump on the couch in any given moment, you must stop. Of course. I'll say, stop jumping on the couch, and I get instant response. Because here's what I've done. Well, I'll tell you, anytime I ever did issue an order, I'm always careful to be very selective about this, where I tell them to do something, and they don't. If they disobey, yes, they do get spankings and punishments. But like I said, that's usually learned by 3 or 4. I mean, I'll confess this, that my first children got a lot more spankings than my last ones. And I put that down to my own inexperience and incompetence. Like, I spanked them because I wasn't as good a father. So they had to pay the price, I think that I did them good. They would say if you talk to my oldest, he's not going to complain about being spanked more or whatever. It's like they're all very proud of their upbringing, so they think well of it, so no, they don't think anything of it. I think of it, I'm like, I could have probably executed that better if I knew what I know now, but I didn't. How can you? And so, all you parents of just a couple of kids, you're starting, you're not doing it right, and you probably won't. You need more practice. And so don't get too caught up in it, because here's the thing. As far as your kids go, what you do with them as they grow up, they'll turn out all right. As far as they're gonna kind of either, or they'll turn out all wrong, but it's mostly gonna turn out based on themselves. You always hear, you always hear the story about the guy who's, his parents were alcoholics and terrible people, and he turned out to be, he made all this money and he became a philanthropist, and he's like this great human being or whatever, And then another guy grew up in the exact same circumstances, and he became a career criminal and blah, blah, blah. So I don't think that, while we can have a heavy impact on our children, yes, but it's not of a necessity. We aren't the only determining factors, the parents. I can't control their outcomes. On some level, that's up to them. If they're going to allow my mistakes to shape their life, on some level, that's a choice they are actually making. Like at some point in their development, they have to choose to fight against it or to allow it to rule them. If that's what it is. Because bad parenting obviously is damaging. But the thing that gets damaged the most is your relationship to them. If you on discipline matters, if we fail in discipline, what suffers often is our own relationship. Because then we need to be able to control children. You can't have wild children running around your house. You need to be able to say when they, you need to be able to tell them at any given time to stop. And stopping needs to happen. There can't be like stop and then I scream and I yell and I run around and I'm trying to get them to stop, but they won't. And that's not a good relationship with your children. That will develop into teen years where you have no control and where they despise you and all this stuff. And because we set the table, we lay the groundwork early on for how things will turn out. I wouldn't know what to do if I couldn't start from the beginning with discipline, because it would be rough starting with a 12-year-old. You need another expert on that one, because for that I have no information. I would only have conjecture. I would only have speculation as how, once I've got a kid who's 12 and I didn't chasten him as a youth, he doesn't listen to me, how do I get him to start listening? I was like, oh boy. If you don't develop, like I said, it's got to be a relationship that's based on, because they not only obey me, it's not just because of fear, it's because of trust. You know what I mean? I don't want to go into it too much. Just like we trust the Lord, and we want to feel like we can trust Him. When we say we trust Him, and then we go through bad things, and do we trust Him? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Maybe we kind of do, maybe we kind of don't. I think it's more of a kind of do, kind of don't type of thing. Because it's hard to absolutely trust anything or anyone. To trust absolutely. Because even if I say I trust God absolutely, what I'm really saying is I trust my understanding of God absolutely. Until God actually shows up and gives me, I trust in the promises of God. I can say that. I trust the promises of God as contained in the scripture, absolutely. Or do I? Or maybe I mean like 99% I trust them or something like that. I don't have perfect faith. I don't have perfect trust. But, we can invest more of that into things that are trustworthy, such as the Lord, right? People, not so much. But oftentimes, even with God, though, our trust in Him is not anywhere near perfect trust. It's a lot closer to kind of trust. Just like, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. I trust that the circumstance is working out for the best, even though it looks like it's really not. You know what I mean? I've watched money go down the toilet. I've watched all kinds of bad things happen where it was like, and just trusting, it's working out for the best. It really is. I don't see how. But there were many things in the time that I was living back years ago where I thought it wasn't working, but now I am where I am, and I'm not like, I want to be someplace else. I'm not like, so to this point, it seemed like everything worked out. It's weird because a lot of the time I wasn't sure if it was working out, and I was worried about something. What was I worried about? Like 10 years ago or 15 years or 20 years ago, I was worried about stuff that was back then. I was all worried and bothered and all up and about things, financial or whatever, There's all kinds of worries. But here I am in the future. And I think I wasted my time worrying about that crap. Because everything's great. I mean, everything isn't totally great, but I assume it is because all that stuff I was worried about either didn't happen or is over. I got through it all right, whatever. I'm still here. All the stuff I used to worry about, and I tell you, I still got things to worry about. Maybe they're bigger things. I'm just less worried about them. Having experienced what I already did with the other worries. I already experienced God, the fact that God is working everything out for me, even things that seem bad, many times. And so even though more things come up that contradict this, like the contradiction of sinners, God isn't for you. Look at this bad thing coming your way. Okay, well, you say it's bad, but I don't know. I mean, there was a time in my life where I used to willingly get on things like roller coasters. I wanted to be terrified. Well, why is it I'll get on an amusement park ride for a roller coaster, but if my life resembles a roller coaster, I got a problem with it? I don't like a few loop-de-loops. Maybe I do like a few loop-de-loops. Am I really longing for a boring, quiet life? Is that true about me? I don't know. All I'm saying is I trust that the continuing work of God is going to be for my benefit and not for my hurt. Even when it hurts. You know what I mean? Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes the chastening of the Lord, sometimes the way you raise a child hurts the child, like in the short term. And I'll show you, I'll tell you what. It's not, like my oldest son trains some of my younger sons. And they do weightlifting. And sometimes weightlifting hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It should hurt all the time, actually. It's not injuring you, but it causes pain. They say no pain, no gain. Man, it's kind of true. If you don't feel your muscles activating, if you're doing exercises and you don't feel, the when the muscle is really straining and you're doing a certain number of reps, there should be pain. You know what I mean? You have an expectation of pain. And I say, yes, work them out. Make them hurt. Run them till they are exhausted. You know what I mean? Run them. Make them run. Make them lift weights. That's what I have them do. Train them. And it's intentional. It's intentional pain. It's not punishment. Not punishment. It's like a gift. Here, I'm going to give you the gift of strength and endurance. But I'm so tired. Oh, my muscles hurt and they ache. Yeah, so what? I don't care. Good. It's supposed to hurt. Get used to it. Things hurt. Things hurt. Oh, boy. If muscle pain is the worst thing I ever have to endure, I'll have a very blissful and idyllic life. That's what I'm saying. It's not just about punishment, but it can be about pain. We suffer, sometimes intentionally. Sometimes God puts us through things just to make us suffer because the suffering brings about a change in us that is beneficial. And it makes us into what he wants us to be, which ultimately is a son of God made after the image of Christ. But our own version of that in the shape of me. You know what I mean? Which is cool. But it requires a certain amount of, putting into the crucible a bit. We got to put them in we got to be heated and purified. And there are all these analogies of processes that are potentially, I don't want to say destructive, but fire and purification and running races and wrestling and lifting weights. These things, and don't be and it's easy to be intimidated by it all, but it's just life. It's just the life God has set before you. It's not what you need to know is a life that the race you're running, it's more like a steeplechase. Steeplechase is the one where they jump over the water and they climb the wall and they run in the hurdles. I'm not exactly sure. I might have gone too far with the climbing the wall. But that's the one where they have like different stuff. They got to jump the water. They got to run a hurdle. They got to do all this weird stuff. If you know what I'm talking about, that particular race. There are obstacles. It's not just a straight run. There's going to be stuff in your way. It's more like, one of those races where it's like cross country and there's like all kinds of unexpected things that could happen. Like a tree could fall in the road. You're racing along and suddenly there's a tree falling in front of you. Or boulders are coming down on top of you. Better run. Better move. Despise not the chastening of the Lord. Don't faint when you are rebuked of him. No, it's rebuke, that's verbal. Chastening could be verbal too. It's child rearing. Just your standard child rearing. That's what I said. It does start with verbal. You got to rebuke first. Like we got a new piano at one point. Someone gave us a piano. It didn't cost us anything, but it was very nice. Very nice piano. My wife plays, right? And the kids play too. And one of the kids started carving it. Just carving into the side of it or whatever. I forgot where exactly, but they were, and I was furious. And I certainly rebuked him and told him he better not do that again. And he's too old to do that and blah, blah, blah. And if he ever does it again, I'm going to give him the belt. Because he was like, 10 or something, 9, I don't know. Too old for doing nonsense. And we don't, what is it? We woodchucks? I mean, we just got a new, you don't carve. I don't know if you didn't know this. I never mentioned it. I didn't think I had to make a rule. But yeah, we don't carve up the new piano. You know what I mean? So that's, and I took that rebuke and it was in that kind of frame. And like, what do you, a little bit of, it's slightly abusive, right? It's like sort of saying, what are you, there's a bit of condescension in it, right? But it's meant to be a rebuke. It's meant to sting and to make think without being really abusive. Like let's say you miserable, little whatever or something like that, or getting physically violent. I don't need to do that. It wasn't that, when I say slightly abusive, I just mean in the sense I like to provoke them to be better. I make comments that, like, I've said to my children, well, maybe I overestimated you and you're not up to this task. I don't mind a little bit of subtle, it's not exactly encouragement. I know that. It's not exactly encouragement. It's a sort of a backhanded encouragement. It's encouragement by saying you didn't do well. Okay. And I'm never afraid to tell my kids you didn't do well. They should know when they didn't do well. And they shouldn't always be praised. They get plenty of praise when they deserve it. And that's the thing is like we give them praise when they deserve it and give them rebuke when they deserve it. Don't just give kids nothing but praise because it's not real. You know what I mean? They're not doing them any good. Really, you're not doing them any good by just filling their heads with praise. There's no good in that. Because all it does is, they know it's phony. Kids aren't stupid. Even if they don't consciously know it's phony, deep down in their heart, they know it's phony. And it creates this phony relationship. He scourgeth. Well, scourgeth, there you go. Scourgeth. Let's look that word up real quick. We got like minutes. And I hope to do more. That's all right. We can talk about this another day. I don't think it's going to be I don't think anyone's going to mind having a little more on these kind of. I'm only on verse 6. Yeah, because it's like, it goes all the way through 12. And we really just. I think it's probably because it's a subject I just feel too much. It's such an important subject because it is our lives. You know what I mean? We live a life in relationship with God, and there is and there are things that happen to us in life that make you think like, I'm supposed to be a king and a priest with Christ, and this is what I got to go through. But remember, Jesus hanging on the cross. And it's like, well, okay, he's king of the world and he's got to go through that. So whatever I'm going through, I'm not as big a deal as he is. So, my suffering isn't as big a deal as his was. I mean, betrayed by your friend and, all that stuff. Mastigo, to flog or scourge. Properly to whip with the mastigos. Oh, whip or flog. So scourge is a good word. Whip is good. I like a whip. I got my favorite whip right here. Oh, yes. The leather belt of father. Actually, there are several of these. Because a bit different. Yes. The strap. I almost never have to use it. I would, though. And have. I mean, there isn't any of them that I think that hasn't gotten it at least once. Because all it takes really is one good hit from that on your butt will make you remember, especially when you're little. But like I said, not too little, obviously. Not the buckle either. Come on. Anyways, I probably just, got myself into whatever. Like I said, it's mostly a threat. Honestly, it's mostly a threat. It's like we can get into belts. And also, I should say, after a certain age, there's nothing. After my kids, somewhere around 12, I'm not sure exactly where the line is because I've never, well, when I was 12, I got the belt for stealing. You know what I mean? And if I would consider a 13-year-old potentially eligible for that, though, you can't, when you get to teenage years, you can't do it anymore. Don't even try. I always remember I saw this video clip of some TV show, and the woman, she's got a 9-year-old, and she's spanking him for the first time. I'm like, it's almost like, what are you? That's weird. I don't think it should be. I should also say, back when my older kids were growing up, I wasn't home as much. You know what I mean? And I think the discipline problems could have been sorted out better if they could have been resorted to me quicker. You know what I mean? Instead of them going on over time and becoming issues that resulted in actual spanking or belting. I like the belt. That's what my dad used. It's kind of, it is a brutal image, is it not? I think it's funny that in our world today, it's almost kind of naughty to say you do that. Yeah, it's considered naughty. I know what I'm doing. I want my children to live. So I chasten them, and it's important. And yeah, I scourge them. I scourge my own son, depending if they deserve it, yes. If they deserve a good whipping, they'll get it. They have to deserve it. It's, what I mean? Like, I don't use that just for minor things. It would be for something significant, like getting caught in a lie. I love catching them in lies, because if you can catch them in a lie, and get them to be truthful all the time, makes things so much easier. That's why I always made it like, tell me the truth. If something happens and I'm not around, just telling me the truth about it means no matter whatever happened, it almost never results in spanking, because I always wanted to make truth-telling to be almost like a get-out-of-jail-free card, because I value knowing what went on more. And there have been times where I've told them, I'm like, well, I'm glad you're telling the truth. Because, and I'll tell you, you should get a spanking for this, but because you told me the truth, I'm gonna let it go this time. If it ever happens again, you get a spanking no matter. It don't matter. You can tell me the truth or whatever. I don't care. You're getting a spanking. That's what happens. Now try to give them a lot of leeway. Use it more as a threat than an actual thing, because the truth is it doesn't hurt that much. And older kids will definitely recognize the fact that a belt on the bottom is more humiliating at that age. That's the thing. It's like, you don't want to humiliate your teenager. Don't do that. Bad idea. Because they feel it unlike any, as an adult, you don't know there's chemical differences in the teenage brain that make them feel that so much more acutely. It's not just an illusion. You grew out of it more than you realize. It's not just you got used to things. There's hormonal differences. in the way it affects your brain. I remember watching something about this where they should demonstrate it. But if you be without, we're gonna have to pick it up with verse 8. Well, we'll start with 7. Whatever. We're not really. We haven't really gotten anywhere except we've gotten into it, which is good. And anyways, we're gonna move. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sorry we didn't cover more today, but I don't know. I'm also. I don't. When the passage speaks to me very deeply, it's hard to rush through it. And so I never am shy about taking as much time as necessary to really talk about a subject, even if we get slightly distracted. I didn't think we were particularly distracted today and getting off topic. So we're 5 minutes over. We'll finish the study. We'll pick it up with verse 7 next time. Okay. Just looking at my thing. All right, thanks for joining me in this study. Look forward to being back again tomorrow to continue in Hebrews.
In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city.